Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Peek Behind EU Careers. Today, very sunny Brussels weather, I have to say. Beautiful autumn day in Brussels. Today, I have in front of me my dear colleague Darinka Bunjevac, who works for the General Secretariat of the Council of the European Union. And I can imagine that many of our listeners are pricking up their ears at this long sentence, General Secretariat of the Council of the European Union. But in simple terms, it's the staff that provides support to the Council of the European Union and also, importantly, to the European Council. Two institutions with the same secretariat. Darinka, thank you so much for joining us today here in Brussels at the RTD studio. I would like to start by asking you, what is it that you do right now in the Council Secretariat?
Right now, I work in the Organizational Development Unit, which is part of the Directorate General for Organizational Services. And specifically, I am a part of a small team within the unit that works on internal communication. What does that mean? Basically, we make sure that the staff that works at the General Secretariat is well informed by the administration of what they are doing and, of course, why they are doing it.
Right. Well, I heard the word communication. I know that before joining, you were working for the BBC as a journalist. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what kind of work you did, and how important was that experience for what you are currently doing?
Yes, it's true. I am a journalist by profession and I would say by heart. Even though I'm working now in internal communication, I'm still a journalist. So I still read the news every day. I'm still a news junkie, which I have been, I think, probably since I was a teenager. And so I started dreaming quite soon that I will be someday a political journalist. Possibly dealing with foreign affairs. And I very soon became interested in these, specifically in the EU affairs, because just at the time when I was finishing my studies, Slovenia started negotiating accession to the EU. It was a young, newly independent country. And yes, I started working in local radio, then TV for a while as well in Slovenia. And then eventually I moved to London to join the BBC World Service, which was fantastic opportunity. And it did, of course, equip me very well for this job that I'm doing now. So I was working there as a radio producer and presenter, a journalist. So I started traveling a little bit around the EU already, working on specific programs covering different EU topics. And also, I was covering quite a few summits, which back then used to take place not only in Brussels, but in the member states that were running the rotating presidency of the Council at the time. So, among other things, I was also covering actually the Big Bang Enlargement Summit in 2004, when Slovenia also joined the EU.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that this exposure as a BBC World Service journalist to EU affairs, traveling around in the European Union, covering summits for the European Council, traveling to Brussels as well, was the start of this idea that maybe I could then join the EU civil service?
Yes, slowly when I was starting to work on these topics as a journalist, I realized that I was really interested, and I thought that maybe someday I might see all this from the other side, from the other perspective. So I did it as a journalist, and I thought maybe someday I would really like to see what's behind all this, which is what I'm able to do now, yes.
And you joined the Council Secretariat initially as a translator.
I did,
right?
Indeed, yes. And because I was also working as a freelance translator for a while in London, there was a translation competition that was open to Slovenian translators because they were very badly needed back then, a few years after Slovenia joined the EU. So I thought, okay, I'll go for it. So I did. I had to basically pass the testing of my English and my French, and I passed. And I arrived to the council as a translator.
And when was that?
That was in 2010.
2010. And how was it moving from London to Brussels? What were your first impressions?
Yeah, it was actually a quite weird move because I first moved from London to Ljubljana, to my hometown, the capital of Slovenia. And then from Ljubljana, I arrived to Brussels, which was quite a bit of a logistical nightmare because when I first moved from Ljubljana to London, I was traveling alone only with a couple of suitcases. When I was moving from London to Ljubljana, 9 years later, I was traveling with my husband, who is British, and with quite a lot more suitcases and furniture. And then again, a year later, I was moving from Ljubljana, then already with my newly born daughter, and then my husband and a lot of furniture. So it was quite a big move. Yes, and it's quite interesting to compare these three cities. London is, of course, huge. So it's huge. It's a fantastic city. It's really good when you're young. It's got so much going for it. It's really exciting. There are a lot of professional opportunities. But it can be also quite exhausting. It's very noisy. So eventually I did realize that I wanted to live somewhere a bit smaller and a bit quieter. Then Ljubljana is a lot smaller, and it's a very lovely green city with a river as well, same as London. But then from there I moved to Brussels, which was again something completely different. And it was a little bit of a shock. I did imagine Brussels a little bit differently. And of course, as soon as when you arrive to the EU quota, you think, oh my God, all these tall buildings, it's not what I imagined Brussels exactly to be. But then you slowly start to discover this city. And I always say Brussels is not love at first sight. But when you start discovering it and realizing, actually, it's quite interesting. There's a lot more to it than just the EU quota, which is interesting in itself. You slowly start getting to like it. And I think Brussels these days, I think it's like just the right size for me. It's about just over 1 million people, so a lot smaller than London, quite a bit bigger than Ljubljana, which has about just over 300,000 people. I think it's just the right size for me. I have to admit that I had to literally drag my husband from Ljubljana to Brussels because he loved it there, even though he's a Londoner. He's lived most of his life in London, but then he really got to like Ljubljana. And if you have been to Ljubljana, you will know why. It's a lovely city. So when I told him, but I'm now getting a job in Brussels and we're going to move again, he wasn't sure he wanted to be here. But slowly we started to like it, and at some point we noticed, both of us, that we started calling it home. That whenever we now go on holiday, that we say, well, now we're going back home, and by that we mean Brussels. What I really like about Brussels is that it's really diverse. In a similar way to London, maybe on a smaller scale, but there are really a lot of languages spoken here, not just the 24 EU languages, but obviously a lot more. And I really like that. And I have to say, when people are all these discussions now, us versus them, and wondering about migration, I'm thinking, but look, I am a migrant. I'm an immigrant to Belgium, to Brussels, and I've met so many people here from not just all over the EU, but I also have friends from outside the EU that live here, work and live in Brussels. And I really like that, and of course you can see these different influences everywhere. I love food, for example, and you really have a lot of
offer. Yes,
absolutely.
In Brussels, I would agree with that.
And I love food markets here in Brussels. I just love being able to go shopping on a Sunday to a food market. I'm actually spoiled by food markets. So we have one tiny one here not far from the Schumann area in Square Marguerite. So that market is on Wednesday afternoons. And then we have a lovely market just a few steps away on Friday afternoons near Plaski. So that's also not very far from the Schumann area. And then my favorite one is I always spend Sunday mornings at Plon Market. I go there for a wonderful coffee. I will say the best coffee in Brussels. So I'm there every Sunday morning at the Place Jourdan.
Lot of interesting tips. You heard it first here in this episode of A Peek Behind EU Careers. I wanted to go back again to your professional life and ask you about the transition from being a translator to working now with internal communication. What led you to move? How easy was it for you to enter what we call in our sort of jargon mobility?
Eventually, I realized that I really wanted to go back to communication. And we have actually two different kinds of communication at the council. So one is external communication, so that it also suitable for someone with my professional experience and my job profile as a journalist. So we have a service at the council that works and takes care of external communication, so communication with EU audience, with public, with journalists, with the media. So that is the external communication part. And then we have internal communication, which of course communicates with internal audience. So that's about 3,000 staff of the General Secretariat. And somehow I ended up in internal communication rather than external communication because simply there was this job opportunity. I applied for it. First, I actually moved to the unit with the help of the scheme that we call, this is another scary EU acronym, we call it MRTT, so Moving Resources to Tasks.
Right.
We have this scheme at the council which actually makes it possible that you don't change job immediately, but you can first try if you want to work in another policy field or another area. I said, okay, they are looking for someone for a few months to work in internal communication, help with the intranet, running the intranet site, and run communication campaigns and film videos. And of course, I had some video expertise. Audiovisual expertise from my time as a journalist, as a broadcast journalist. So I did that, and I did that for a few months, and I liked it. And luckily, the unit was just then looking for the editor-in-chief of our internal website. So I applied,
and you got it,
and I got it. Yeah,
success story there. What sort of advice would you give our audience if they are thinking about applying to a competition? Is there anything based on your experience, both as a candidate but now as an official, that you could share with us?
Yes, I always feel weird when I'm asked about giving advice to young people because I think one of the things that I do as part of my job is that I mentor actually young people. I mentor all of our unit's trainees. So I would say start as a trainee already. Try to get a traineeship, maybe the Blue Book traineeship with the Commission or the Parliament or the Council. We also recruit trainees every semester, so twice a year. So start. You can always start as a trainee. It doesn't have to be straight after you graduated, or it might be even before you finished your postgraduate degree. We had some really young, we had some slightly older trainees, and I love mentoring them, and I love actually learning from them as well. So I've learned quite a little bit from them. So I find it weird when I'm asked to give them advice because I'm thinking, but they know so much already.
It's quite let's say, topical, this idea of reverse mentorship, where officials already with a certain level of experience are actually mentored by newcomers, by young newcomers.
Yeah.
It's something that is happening more and more. Maybe an idea just to leave hanging around. But I wanted to listen to your advice.
Yes, I would say just go for it. Try, become a trainee, go for the competitions. Prepare well. Look into what the EU does. Of course, look at what the institutions does, where you want to work. So be prepared. And I would also say be flexible. Be adaptable, because obviously you're working in EU, which is composed of 27 member states. So you have people from different countries with different backgrounds working in the EU. So you have to be quite aware that you're going to be working in a multicultural, multilingual environment, maybe with different working styles, and you have to adapt to all that and also be prepared to learn. I would say be curious. It's really, there are so many opportunities to learn. When I arrived to Brussels, I was in my late 30s now. I nearly betrayed my age. And I thought I knew everything. And of course, since I've been working here and now I don't know not anything, but I don't know everything. And I've really learned a lot. And I would really say to young people, it's worth it because you will really discover so much. You will learn a lot. But also, I know this sounds a little bit idealistic, but if you think you want to make a difference, not just for your own professional development and your own career, but if you want to make a difference, I'm still of the generation that believes, and I hope that young people these days believe as well, that the EU can still make a difference. I know it's not perfect. I know it's a work in progress. It's based on compromise and teamwork and negotiations. But I still believe it's a wonderful thing. I believe that when Slovenia was desperately trying to join the EU, and I still believe that we have all experienced the benefits, not just peace and stability in Europe, but also protecting our rights and fighting against climate change. And you think, this is something I want to do, this is something where I could contribute, go for it.
Well, on that note, Darinka, very inspiring, and I'm sure that those listening to us have probably taken note of the many good things that you've said. I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us, for sharing what your experience has been so far. So this was one more episode of A Peek Behind EU Careers. Thank you to everyone who was listening to us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
A Peek Behind EU Careers by the European Personnel Selection Office is an opportunity for people to learn about the life, work of EU staff in the so-called Eurobubble in Luxembourg, in Brussels, and beyond. It is supported by the Director General for Research and Innovation, in whose studios we record the podcast.